defeating detail and interior lines. In this video, we are going to analyze these two concepts. Welcome to GeoSpinach. Now let's get directly into the video. We have a scenario, we have the red team and the black team. Here, the red team, we assume that we see that they have way more troops than the black team. They have surrounded the black team. The black team, though, is not, it still has communication and supplies coming from outside, so there is not an issue of that, but they are surrounded. But they have interior lines. So before we go into the video, let's see what we mean by interior lines. By interior lines, we mean the distance that it takes to go from one place, so this unit, the distance it needs to take to go here is much less than the distance that this unit needs to take to go from here all over the way here. So interior lines means you have faster communication and supplies within your unit cohesions. Okay? Now, secondly, what we see here in the battlefield is a very good mountainous terrain here, which is naturally very defensible terrain. A city, which, as we said, cities and urban areas are the best for defense. And the general idea for the black team is to concentrate its forces while maintaining a defense and then applying defeating detail. What does defeating detail mean? Well, let's find out. So, originally, the plan of the red team is attack across the whole front. You have to understand that the other team has no idea what's happening behind the lines. So, the red team here, for example, does not know what is happening here. So it cannot track the movement of troops that the black team is doing. The only thing they can know are the units that they are fighting directly. So the plan of the black team is to gradually retreat to way better defensible positions behind the mountains and at the same time start concentrating troops using interior lines of defense. Now this takes quite some time to be done. And we see it here. The red team attacks, the black team gradually retreats with a planned retreat, and at the same time, because it has interior lines, the moment it will receive fire from the enemy from here, for example, it can quickly move its troops to deal with the situation. So even if troops, for example, this brigade here was going to be used in the attack, because, for example, an attack was received on their left flank, it's quickly diverted to deal with that situation. So this is the original plan, and the battlefield moves like this. So the encirclement tightens, and unbeknownst to the red team, and this is very important, the concentration of troops here is not shown. So they do not know that the black team has managed to move its forces, it's starting to move its forces. We can see it here where the black team is gradually taking its armored units and its mechanized units, using the road system to locate them as close as possible to their location where their attack is going to commence. So here, the red team has managed to gain quite a lot of ground, so they are continuing their offensive, and they are putting a special attention to the area over here as well as the left flank. The idea is to roll over the left flank. So rolling over means gradually decimating the left flank of the enemy and eventually collapsing and using your superior forces. Maybe breaching the mountains, which is not advisable, but they have more forces, so inevitably they will eventually break, and slam behind in between the city and the mountain range. So that's the general plan of the red team. While the black team has a very simple plan and the only possible plan they could use, which is a concentration of force to deal with defeating detail. And that's what they're doing. So as we can see here, the black team is gradually retreating its forces from the left flank in a gradual retreat behind some pre-existing defensive line that they are planning for, and at the same time they're creating a concentration here in the blue circle. Here the arrow shows where the attack will inevitably commence, but for any attack to take place it needs time to be reorganized. So now the troops are all going to be moved there, pre-plan their attack, and then they're gonna strike. So we go to the phase 2, phase 3. The red team for flank attack on the left is moving with a very strong force, so they are starting to roll the front over here. As you can see with the blue markers, the brigades of the black team there are getting severely damaged. At the same time though, the red team is also receiving some damages here in the mountainside as they are attacking due to mountainous terrain, which is very defensible. They are getting disproportionately more damages, but they are pushing the enemy through, and they manage to achieve a small bridgehead over here behind the city. Now, what the black team has managed to do all of this time is to manage to achieve this concentration of troops, which is 3 brigades strong of armor, as well as 1 mechanized brigade and 2 infantry brigades. And opposed of them are 2 infantry brigades with non-defensible positions whatsoever. So, what is the plan for the black team to deal with this? So, the idea is pretty simple. Break through that line, so use all of your armor concentration. So across the front line, as we have seen, so across here, here, and here, they have less forces than the enemy. But here comes the concept of defeat in detail. They've managed to concentrate quite a lot of big force at a very specific point, which is this location over here. And at this location over here, they have way more troops than the red team, and as a result, a breakthrough is almost guaranteed. And on top of it, the fact that they didn't attack immediately and they let themselves prepare for such an assault makes the surprise and the shock, and most importantly, the breakthrough ability even better. And the aim is to continue using interior lines and defeat in detail to eliminate the enemy. And by doing so, we see a scenario like this. So the black team has managed to push through. So they managed to encircle 2 brigades, the brigades that they received the majority of the hit from those armored. So those brigades have received massive casualties. They managed to break through the right flank of the enemy over here on the right. So the whole right flank here of the red team is completely exposed and open terrain, as well as their logistical supplies of the red team are now strenuous. So they are quite problematic, because they will be easily exposed. And at the same time, and that's the most important thing, here on the left, the units of the red team are cut off completely out of supplies. They still have some armor with mechanized troops that has received some casualties, but they're out of supplies. So their main plan is to reach back with their defensive lines. So how do they deal with this situation? And here is the idea. Now, again using interior lines, because the black team, for example, the red team is continuing their attack from the flank over here, as you can see. Since they are continuing their attack here and the black team is at the breaking point, they are using their interior lines to move their armor brigade over here to protect for a possible expansion. At the same time, the red team is suffering from very long lines, so the units the infantry divisions over here, the armor brigade over here, the other armor brigade over here, because they have to go on a long march. It will take quite a lot of time for them to reach those exposed positions we referred prior. And at the same time, the black team will continue their attack using concentrated forces to create multiple further encirclements. At the same time, and this is part of the German School of War, a little treat for you guys. The idea here is that the black team is going to try to create some sort of a defensible line here, but they will refuse to commence and fight the enemy. The idea is that they will offer the enemy resistance, but they will gradually retreat and just let the enemy expand its remaining supplies. With the arrows, where I'm showing the demoralization of the forces. And here we see that the plan, for example, here is to reinforce, and for the troops on the south to attack and push through. So this develops in a scenario such as this. So starting from the left, the red team has managed to launch a counterattack. The black team is receiving some casualties, but again, they are running out of supplies. Their flank here is exposed, but because those units are infantry, it's really hard for them to catch up, and at the same time being constantly engaged with the enemy forces. So they are constantly fighting with the enemy forces, and as a result, they cannot disengage the enemy. So they're only using their armor to try to break through. The black team is using the pre-existing defensive positions to delay them. And at the same time, they manage to encircle their forces of the enemy here and create a small encirclement over here. Now the black team knows that the concentration of armor of the red team over here, despite the casualties, is still strong. So keeping that encirclement tight could be quite hard. So again, they will focus for an idea of, again, using interior lines and defeat in detail to reconcentrate and use another blow of bigger concentration of force. So they will not stop the red team from recreating the communication lines over here, but what they will do is use all of their armor and their closer distance to create a force concentration over here, as I am showing. At the same time, launch and counterattack from the north and eliminate the pocket that's remained on the right flank, and at the same time pin the enemy down. Pin the enemy down means continually shooting and engaging the enemy. At the same time, the mechanized forces on the south, the remaining mechanized forces, and the infantry will attempt to do an encirclement of the infantry units remaining, and at the same time, the black team over here, as I mentioned prior, will again retreat to better defensive positions and let the red team's remaining force get completely exhausted. Moving on, we come to a situation such as this. Starting from the left, the forces over here are completely out of supplies, only infantry units with no good defensible terrains, so their surrender is almost guaranteed. Their armor over here are still relatively strong, but now they have quite heavy casualties, and they are running completely out of supplies. They are completely disorganized, and their communications with their main forces is practically completely cut off at this point. So they have no communications with what's happening on the right. So they do not know that if the troops on the right is coming for their rescue. And at the same time, the black team has managed to create a concentration of force, as we mentioned here, as well as here. So their attempt now is to create a bigger encirclement. And at this point, the red team just gets the memo, which the idea is mass surrender, mass retreat. So they will try to use all of their remaining armor to push in and get away. So the green arrow over here. So we'll try to push in and save their lives completely. And in the process of doing so, it will result for them to lose a lot of infantry. This, for example, we've seen it in the battles of North Africa. Whenever Rommel retreated after the Battle of El Alamein, all of the Italian infantry had to be left behind because it's really hard for infantry to move fast while armor moves much faster. The black team doesn't have so strong armor forces to completely cut them off, but firing on them from artillery from both sides and having continuous counterattacking on both flanks of the enemy will result in the enemy escaping, having tremendous casualties. At the same time, they're doing a small maneuver to scare off the enemy on the south to force it to pull back. And we come to a scenario such as this. The forces now on the left are completely out of supplies and practically they are dead in the water. So the troops over here, they are practically dead in the water. The troops over here, the red team, are in good defensible positions, but up to this point they're completely disconnected from the enemy, so the black team doesn't even have to commit on destroying those units. They will inevitably surrender. A huge portion of the armor of the enemy has managed to escape, but has received tremendous casualties in doing so. And that's very important, remembering that retreating and being routed is a very negative effect. And at the same time, they have 2 more pockets of encirclement. And that's it, game over. So what we have seen here is that interior lines of defense in combination of defeat in detail can be used to rout the enemy, and we have seen that a rout of the enemy can lead to a massive panic, which that massive panic will lead to the attempt to escape, which will result to even more casualties of your forces, where you come to a scenario that your remaining attacking capabilities of your forces are very, very, very minimal, to the point that you are unable at any point to conduct any sort of a counterattack. And that's the game over. Thank you for watching. Please